quality assured excel. I welcome you all to the lecture, Bhakti and Svadharma and Varṇāśramadharma and Vidharma, questioning the boundaries of the self and its dharma in the Pushti Marga Sampradaya. This will be delivered by Dr. Aditya Chaturvedi, who is a professor in the Division of Humanities and Languages at the School of Arts and Sciences at the Ahmedabad University. His teaching and research interests encompass Indian intellectual history, Indian art history, and Sanskrit. His research focuses on Vaishnava Vedanta traditions and Bhakti in the late 2nd millennium CE, Tantra, the Ramayana traditions of Bihar, and practice of everyday Hinduism. He is also a distinguished Arabic college. We welcome you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction and invitation, and I don't know if I'm distinguished enough. Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks to ABD, Dr. Dayal for organizing this, the History Society, Sanskrit. Are there any Sanskrit students here? Please, nobody.
Actually, I'm not from Sanskrit, but I'm in the Sanskrit Society. I'm the joint secretary.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I did a lot of Devanagari typing at the 11th hour for Sanskrit students. That said, I'm going to keep this talk a little bit interactive, like at least at the beginning, so that I get a sense of what we took, like in this room. Together we know about Bhakti. Am I audible without mine? I guess so, right? So yeah. So let's hear from students. What do we know? Like, what comes to your mind when you hear of Bhakti? There's a new one. Just anything, I'm sure. Yeah. Worship of one, worship, good. And how would you translate this in the Indian language? Worship, the word worship. Puja, good. The word I was looking for. Anything else about Bhakti?
Surrender to the lotus feet of God.
Surrender. And surrender, how would you translate? Sharanagati. Perfect. There's a text called Sharanagati here by Rama. Anything else? Anything else about Bhakti? How do we study Bhakti? Like, what do we think of Bhakti? Anybody studied it in school? In Hindi literature? Bhajan and couplets, yeah. So it was part of what? Like all these songs, and
There was a Bhakti movement in history.
Bhakti movement, right? So it's a movement or andolan, right? Andolan. So this term, so if you read Jack Haley's, John Stratton Holly's book, A Storm of Songs, I think which came out in 2015, if I'm not wrong, you would see like how he gives this history of the Bhakti movement, like how this became a term and whether there was a movement. Because when we think of movement, we are thinking of, that something will bring some social change or it's addressing some oppression. And Bhakti has been studied like that for a very long time, right? Something against Brahmanical fold or Brahmanical religion that had become, and like there was no mediation between the practitioner and the Lord. So all that is there, right, in Bhakti movement, and there is surrender. So you have wonderful translation by Ramananda. Oh, Jesus. Sorry. Okay. So yeah. So, but was Bhakti really a movement? So it was Grierson. Sir Grierson, who was, I think, the surveyor who conducted this linguistic survey of India. He was the head of that, and he was a linguist. So he lived in northern India, and I was posted at several places in Bihar, modern day Uttar Pradesh, and Bengal. And he, in an article written around 1890s, came up with the term Bhakti movement. And then comes out the Hindi Sahitya Ka Itihas, which is Acharya Ramchandra Shukla, and he uses that term. So he translates movement as andolan and uses it. So then it becomes a thing. So when he and if you remember, in Mill's history, we have this division. So history has been divided as ancient, medieval, and then modern. So all medieval India, medieval Hindi literature became about Bhakti. So that is Bhakti Kal and Bhakti Andolan. And then you have the two, again, all the poets have been classified as any. So like Kabir Das, Tulsi Das, Mirabai, Dadu Dayal, there's a scheme of classification, right? Sagun and Nirgun Bhakti poets, right? So then you study poets who were more radical than the others, like Kabir or Rai Das, even Dadu Dayal to some extent. And then there are these orthodox kinds, so who are not radical enough for our historians' likings. So there is this kind of division, and when we think about Bhakti, we are also thinking about vernacular, because movement is then associated and with that. So it is seen as a Protestant reform movement. So just as you studied in the rise of modern world, or is it called modern West? West. Okay. Oh, so for FY, erstwhile FI UP batch, it was modern world. The paper's name had been changed, but the syllabus was the same. So if you think about Luther, he was trying to do something different, and he was, printing Bible in German. So something similar was happening then in India, because that was the model with which these traditions were being studied. So there's a lot of focus on vernacular and especially songs, because Bhakti is all about songs. It's storm of songs, it's Pauli's works. But my focus is slightly different. So, and Varṇāśramadharma, again, is sort of a hot topic in these discussions, because Bhakti is studied as something that is questioning the Varṇāśramadharma, and it's very radical in its nature, and it was supposed to bring reforms, but where are they, right? If it was meant to bring those reforms, things should have changed, right? So I will, give my thesis at the beginning itself. I think that the practice of Bhakti, at least in some traditions, need not necessarily involve abandoning Varṇāśramadharma, which a lot of people have argued, but even traditions like the Sagun Bhakti tradition, which Pushti Marga gets classified as, and it's a wrong classification to begin with, because Pushti Margiyas would say that they are Nirgun Bhakti Upasakas, and we'll get into that and see why. And this is so because Bhakti, through practice of Bhakti, apparently, you shed your Varṇāśramadharma. So it's not a requirement in the sadhana, but it's the phala, it's the fruit of Bhakti, which makes you averse to Varṇāśramadharma, not the other way. Okay, so we will come to this later in the discussion. And so let's begin. So what is Pushti Marga? I heard that some of you third years at least have been studying the Pushti Marga. Maybe I shouldn't be quizzing you on that. So it's a Vaishnava Bhakti tradition. It was founded by Mahaprabhu Vallabhacharya. You can see him in this painting from Nagwara school, early 19th century. And this tradition, so the idea, do we know what Pushti means? Have you heard the word Pushti? Pushta, Krishta Pushta. Huh? Healthy, right? Yeah, nourish. वो Krishta Pushta, right? So the Pushta here is nourishment. But nourishment through what? So the Bhagavata says Poshanam tat anugraha. So nourished by its grace. And the tad is Bhagavan's. So this is a marga where the nourishment, where the Lord is being graceful and you are receiving the grace of the Lord and you are just relying. So there is a sense of Sharanagati, a sense of surrender at the feet of the Lord. So therefore this is called Pushti Marga. So you do not rely on some sadhana, like I will perform this bhajana and God will give me this and that. So there is no transactional relationship, but you have completely depend on the Lord for your everyday, for sustenance and whatever. Then it's popular among Western Indian communities, especially Gujarati communities, and also in Rajasthan. So Shondeep Shaha has written about it. So it originates in close to us in Mathura, Govardhan to be specific. an important shrine of Srinathji was there. Now he has moved to Mewar. And then Krishna is the supreme ontological principle. So Krishna is identified with the Brahman of the Brahma Sutras and the Upanishads. And seva or devotional service to his material images is the salvific practice. So the Swarup seva or sort of you see a lot of reels these days of people carrying their deities. So that is not a Pushti Marga practice, by the way. But that sort of gets introduced. To have your personal images at home and treat them as your family member is a doctrine that we find here. Apart from other traditions also, but say you wouldn't find this in Sri Vaishnavism, which is Varṇāśramadharma's tradition. And then somebody said, something about bhakti associated with worship. So some people would define bhakti as worship. To be specific, bhakti as meditative worship. And this is Ramanujacharya in his Brahma Sutra Bhashya, so Sri Bhashya. By the way, if you are not following something, just raise your hand and ask me, and I will clarify, because this might otherwise sound like Hebrew, unless you know Hebrew, so I should be using that as an example. So worship would be meditative worship, which is upasana. You might have heard of it. Like we find a lot of upasanas in the Upanishads. So Ramanujacharya very clearly says that bhakti is upasanayaha paryaya. Okay, so that it is synonymous with upasana. And what is this upasana? Upasana is sort of sadat smaran, or a constant remembrance, and how he compares it with tel dharanuvar, just like the flow of oil stream. So similarly, bhakti is this constant flow of smriti, of thought, smaran, of the supreme being. Not broken, just like the stream of oil. So that's the idea. But Vallabha, we'll see, defines it slightly differently. So the broader questions that I have for today is, how do Pushti Margas define bhakti and self, and what is Svadharma for Pushti Margas? So in section 1 of this talk, we look at bhakti as seva and the conceptualization of self in the Pushti Marga, and in the section 2 we look at seva and Varṇāśramadharma. So just to give you a sense of timeline, because after all we are all historians and we care about time, we are not talking in like abstraction. So Vallabhacharya, Mahaprabhu Vallabhacharya lived between 1479 and 1531, so he was a contemporary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from Bengal. So these traditions actually rise together, they are developing together. He had two sons, Gopinathji and Vithalnathji, but Gopinathji passes away very soon in Puri. So Vithalnathji becomes the head of the Sampradaya. So Gopinathji was also, but let's just stick to Vithalnathji. And then he had 7 sons, and each of them becomes head of what is called Pitha, so a seat of the Pushti Marga tradition. And they all have these images which had been sort of served by Mahaprabhuji or his Vallabhacharyas or his devotees, his disciples. So, but today we'll be looking at 3 sons and their commentaries. In fact, I'm going to miss Raghunathji for lack of time. So there's Balakrishnaji, Gopulnathji and Raghunathji, and they are Vallabhacharya's grandsons. So we are looking at their texts. So, and these are the texts that we are going to look at. So there is Vallabhacharya's Tattvaṭhadīp Nibandha, which is the lamp on the purport of the essence. So it's a short essay on the meaning of the Bhagavata Puran. You might have heard of it in your ancient India, medieval India classes of the text. Then, and also, I mean, there are a lot of Kathavachakas around, so you see these big posters on the Bhagavata. So then there is Bhakti Vardhana, the augmenter of devotion. It's one of the 16 texts where Vallabhacharya talks about how to augment Bhakti, how to strengthen Bhakti. Then there is the Chatushloki, the 4 verses on teaching, so where he defines Bhakti as the 4 Purusharthas, Dharma, Kama, Artha and Moksha. And he says that all of this for Pushti Margas is Krishna and his Bhakti. Then we have Vithalnathji. So Vithalnath is Vallabhacharya's son, and he wrote this text called the Bhakti Hamsa, or the Swan of Devotion. So what are the swans associated with? Any guess? I mean, at least in Kavi Samaya. So swans can separate milk, water, like milk from water. So if you put like milk and water together, it will be able to just make, I guess, milk and leave water. So, and that's the kind of thing Vithalanji does in this text. It's a Vada Grantha. And then we have third generation commentaries on the Bhakti Varni. So then we'll come back and see like how Vallabhacharya's grandsons rather, are reading their grandfather and how are they commenting. They often disagree with each other. I mean, this gives historians to write more. So let's talk a little bit about the Bhagavata Purana and the Vedanta. So when we think of the Vedanta, at least the early Vedanta, Patrick Oliver, then it is the Upanishads, right? You come to Van Buchanan times when you have the Bhagavad Gita also entering the right. So the three important texts of, so to say, departure. So if you comment on these three texts which are Vedantic in nature or like deal with the nature of reality, Brahman, nature of the world, Jiva, etc. So that is what the Upanishads contain. The Brahma Sutras and Upanishads, have been dated. I won't get into that. The Brahma Sutras are dated somewhere in between, depending on whom you are reading, 2nd century BC to 2nd century CE. Some people would also say that it like maybe 5th century was when they really got crystallized in the form that we know. Then the Bhagavad Gita, again, it's from maybe it was a later addition to the Mahabharata, but there are, Gita shlokas which would say, Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopalanantara, right? Vatsa Partho Sudhi Bhokta Dugdham Gitamritam Mahat. So the Gita is like this cow that that contains all the knowledge of the Upanishads, and then Krishna is the cowherd who's then milking the cow, and the nectar that is coming out is the Gita. So it contains the essence of the Upanishads. That's the kind of idea that we find about the Bhagavad Gita. So people, beginning with Shankaracharya, would comment on the Bhagavad Gita, and they would propound what their version, their interpretation of the Vedanta looks like. But then later Vaishnava Vedantins like Madhvacharya. So first Vaishnava Vedantin that we have, the big one, the sort of like more famous one, is Ramanujacharya. So he wrote what is called the Sri Bhashya, and his primary interlocutor there is Shankaracharya. So he is sort of dismantling Shankaracharya's thesis. And Shankaracharya says, argues rather, that there is a non-duality in this world. And what you see as this multiplicity and duality of like I and mine and you and this and that, that is caused by Maya, which is and it is illusion. So now Ramanujacharya comes and he says that no, the Brahman is Vishnu. He's one. He identifies Brahman with Vishnu and argues that the jivas, the individual soul, is not identical with the supreme soul, but rather part of it. Okay, so there is a sharir and shariri relationship, like anga and angi bhava of sorts. So it's like they are limbs of or part of the supreme being. But Bhagavata is not a big deal by then. Maybe it has been composed, but the Vedantins aren't engaging enough with it by then. And if you want to read like a little bit on the history of Vedanta or the Bhagavata, then you should read Anand Venkatrakrishnan. His book is out, I think. So you might want to note down his name. But Madhvacharya is the first commentator or first Vedantin, and Madhvacharya is dualist. So he says there is an absolute distinction between the individual soul and the supreme soul. So he's a Dvaitavadin. And he then argues, so he was one of the first few Vedantins who comments on the Bhagavata, or at least writes an essay on it, and treats it as a text that is of importance or should be of importance to the Bhagavata. And also, just something about the Bhagavata and other Puranas. So if you read Puranas like later in your life or even now for some project that you are doing, you would see like sometimes Puranas could go really haywire. Like, I mean, they would really puzzle you because the narrative is all over the place. Skanda Purana especially. So there is no coherence often. But if you look at the Bhagavata Purana, it seems like it was workshopped really well. So there is coherence, and it is engaging with these Vedantic principles. So it, in fact, it begins with the second sutra of the Brahma Sutras, which is Janmatyasya Yatha. So it begins with by making a reference to the Brahma Sutra, which is a respectable text by this time. Another thing that we must remember before we go ahead is in this world of Shastras, and Shastras act as Pramanas. Do we know what Pramanas are? Anybody? Yes?
Types of proof,
Yeah, types of proof. So can you name some?
Pratyaksha Pramana and Shabda Pramana.
Wonderful. So what do Mimamsakas regard as Pramana? The best kind. Shabda Pramana. Okay, so they would say that the verbal testimony is the best kind of Pramana. And Pramana is not just proof, but Pramana is a way of knowing, it's the method of knowing something in the correct manner. Okay, so it's a means of knowing something, and they would say that the verbal testimony is the best of the Pramanas, because Vedas, as you know, are apaurushaya, so they are authorless and they are infallible. Therefore, because if something comes out of human mouth, then it would be like, okay, somebody might be like deceitful. They might also not know everything. So therefore, Mimamsakas, who then figured out this hierarchy of Shruti and Smriti texts, you would remember this from your passage. So Shruti is the Vedas and Smritis are all these Dharma Shastras and Puranas also are Smriti, Kavya and Itihas also Smriti. So the Smriti texts would then be considered at a lower level. So their authority is derivative in this world. So long as they are in agreement with what the Shruti, what the Veda is saying, they can be considered as valid means of knowledge. But if they say anything against the Vedas, then no. Okay? So, yeah. So now, what does Vallabhacharya say about the Pramana? So he says, Veda Shri Krishna Bhakyani Vyasa Sutrani Saivani Samadhi Bhasha Vyasasya Pramanita Chatushraya. So the Vedas, the statements of Krishna, that is the Bhagavad Gita, the Vyasa Sutras, the Brahma Sutras, that is, so they're actually, so earlier, they're called the Badarayana Sutra, and then something happens and Badarayana and Vyasa become one. So there are Vyasa Sutras, and Vyasa is also the author of the Mahabharata, so no wonder that, of the Bhagavata Purana, so no wonder that he begins the Bhagavata Purana by taking a sutra from the Brahma Sutras. Okay? So Vyasa's contemplative language. So Samadhi Bhasha Vyasasya. So if you know the story of the Bhagavata's, sort of creation. So Narada comes to Vyasa, and after Mahabharata, war is over, Vyasa is like, okay, I'm so sorry for what has happened and blah blah blah, and he's really depressed. And so Narada comes to him and says that, okay, you should contemplate on Bhagavan Krishna. Krishna is also left by them. And it is in his samadhi, in his deep meditative state, that the Bhagavata appears to him. So, so Mahaprabhuji is very clear, Vallabhacharya is very clear that this is samadhi bhasha that we are taking as pramana. And then he sort of gives so like why have four? If the Vedas are there, why have four pramanas? If you have the best infallible source of valid knowledge, why have four sources? So then he says, Uttarottaram Purva Sandeha Varakam Parikirtitam. So each sort of proceeding text removes doubts, succeeding text removes doubts that arise in the preceding text. So if you have a doubt in the Vedas, you go to the Gita. If you have doubt in Gita, then you go to the Vyasa Sutras. And if you have a problem with the Vyasa Sutras, then you go to the Bhagavata Purana. Does that make sense? Okay. Great. So this is his sort of hierarchy, or we can say like his way of arranging his canon of texts of valid knowledge. So we remember there were just 3 texts, and now we have 4 in this world. So this is the quartet of authoritative texts according to Vallabhacharya. Then I should tell you this story. So now here we enter into the realm of dharma. So at one place, I think it's the I think it's the 7th or the 8th Karika in the Tattvarthadik Nibandha, where Vallabhacharya says that, after contemplating a lot on the nature, because the Shastras are saying so many things, so one has to then, come to a conclusion. And the question that he had was like, which is the best Shastra, which is the best God, which is the best mantra, and what is one's karma. So how do we understand karma, by the way? How do we define karma?
Action.
Action. Okay, what sort of action? Any action?
Good action.
Good action. Good. Yes.
Karma without the phala, which is the objective of that karma.
Yeah, it's Gandhi's Martyrs Day today, so yeah, we should be talking about Anasakti also. Yes. So yeah. So it's that as well. I mean, the Gita is trying to teach you Anasakti Yoga, not to be sort of attached to the fruits of the action. But the understanding of action, karma here is that is dharma. So if you look at the Mimamsa Sutras, karma there is the ritual action of the Vedas. So the yag is the karma, and it is also the dharma because the Veda is asking you to perform that duty. So something that impels you to do something is dharma, and there's these ritual actions. So therefore, kratu, for example, is the word for yagas. So that's the kind of understanding here. So he's asking like, what is the best karma? And the answer is Tasya Devasya Seva. So Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Geetam. So there is only one Shastra which is the song of the Lord. Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva. Okay, there is just one God which is Devaki's son, Krishna. Mantro Pekasya Tasya Namani Ani Karma Pekasya Ekam Tasya Devasya Seva. So all his names are the mantras, and his seva, his service is the action. So this is where he sort of defines. So this is a very decisive statement for him because there is a story associated with him. So in the commentary we read that there is an Akhyayika, there is a story. So apparently once in the court of the Utkal Naresha, there was a debate between Mayavadins. So Mayavadins are Advaita Vedanta. So there it's their sort of it's the title that very lovingly these Vaishnava Vedantins give to Advaitins because so they feel that Shankaracharya got it all wrong because he thinks that Maya is something different from Brahman, or at least it's Sadasat Vilakshana, Anirvachaniya. So it is neither Sat nor Asat, and it is Vilakshana, it is something else. So it is not pure form of non-dualism, right? Because you are accepting another principle, and that principle which is causing the world to come into existence, come into being, at least even, if it's a fallacy, if it's false, it is something different than Brahman. So there is an implied dualism, and which is what these our Vaishnava Vedantins don't like, and they say that they are not Brahmavadins, they are Mayavadins, because they are propounding the doctrine of Maya, not really Brahman. This is their reading, by the way, of Shankaracharya. So now, at the court of Utkala Naresha, these two people were fighting on this question, Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gita, okay? And so let's see. So Akhyayika tu Purvam Utkaleshwara Sabhayam Mayavadi Brahmavadina Uvivadanto. So they were debating, the two Mayavadi and the Brahmavadi. Saptaham Samanau Vivade Sthitau. So the debate went on for a week. Tatha Ragya Vigyapito Bhagavan Idam Ratro Patre Vikitva Dattavan. Okay? Then the king basically, like in the story, places a page. No, so he tells us that Bhagwan has written something on the letter and given it to me. So Bhagwan Idam Ratro Patre Vikitva Dattavan. What? Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra. So apparently Jagannath himself wrote this on a patra and gave it to the Utkal king. Tada Mayavadina Kalpitam Idam Ityuktam. So the Mayavadi, so there's Shankarite, he said no, this is Kalpitam. So somebody has faked it, and this can't be the Lord saying. So Tada Ragya Apare Dvai Ratra Patre Punah Sthapite. Okay, so then he kept the page again, so he kept the letter again, asking for divine intervention. Yaha, and then what the Lord says, it's rather mean. So Yaha Puman Pitaram Drishti Tam Vidyan Anyat Retasam. So So one who censures or like doesn't like his father, that person should be known as somebody born of like somebody else's seed. That is what this could be like translated as. And yaha puman harin dveshtim tam vidyat antya retasam iti likhitva datta. And so if somebody who is going against the Lord, which is what this Mayavadi was doing, he should be known as born of some like Mlecha's seed or something. So which is rather bad. Okay. So tada ragya sabhishikam tal mata prishtasati. So then the king calls his mother and inquires about his like who his father is. Mlechar धावकात् अयम् उत्पन्न इति अवोचत् ततः स स्वदेशात् राज्ञा निस्सारत इति तत्र प्रसिद्धात् ऐतिहायात् अवगन्तव्येत इति अर्थः. Okay, so then the king finds out. The king calls his mother. The mother sort of says, yeah, I had this son with okay, I mean this is a casteist statement to make. So apparently with a washerman or somebody. And or a mlecha, we do not know. I mean, these words could be read differently. And therefore, then he is banished from the court. So the Mayavadin is banished from the court. What does this prove? This basically proves that this Brahmavadi Mahaprabhu Vallabhacharya was correct about this. And this was the statement of God that and Mayavadin was not agreeing with it because it didn't sit well with him. So, what is the place of individuated self here in this? We have learned what the thesis is to some extent, right? That the best God is Krishna, the best text is the Gita, his names are the mantras, and the best action is to perform that God's seva. But what is the status of the individual soul with this, Paramatma? So there he would say that Maya hi Bhagavata Shakti Sarva Bhavana Samarthya Rupa Tatraiva Sthita. Okay? So Maya is Bhagavata Shakti. It is a capacity of the Lord. Okay, so it's not a distinct principle, but it's a capacity of the Lord. And Tatraiva Sthita, it is situated in him. And what does it do? Sarva Bhavana Samarthya Rupa. It can bring everything into being. So it is the capacity through which the Lord brings the world into being. It is not separate from him. Ramanartham eva prapancha rupena vidhavokte vaichityam vina tat asambhavo yatha tasmat hetor uttarasya bhagavataha shakya avidyaya jivasya samsare uchyate na tu jayate. So therefore, and why is this world? So the world comes into being because the Lord was getting bored. Okay, eke vaina reme. And then he ekam syat bahu prajaye. So he was one and he wanted to become many because he was just getting bored alone. So he became many. That's the and so Ramanartham eva. So the world is for his play. He wants to be entertained. He wants to play. So therefore he's playing through this world by becoming many. So he himself has become many. And here, if you look at this verse, he says Jiva Swarupa Nirupanartham. It should be Nirupanartham. Brahmana Sakashat Vispulingadi Vat Udbhavam Bhaktum Karanabhuta Brahma Swarupa. So Brahma is the Karanabhuta. Brahma is the cause of the Jiva. And how does this Jiva look? So the relationship, it comes in the Upanishad, is Vispullinga. So Vispullinga are the sparks to the fire. Have you seen fire? You have, right? Have you seen sparks? So, I mean, sparks are like, maybe technically, I don't know. I mean, there's a physicist, so I wouldn't dare to say anything about fire and anything physical. But, okay, so, but they look similar, right? They look similar, and so sparks and fire sort of, share this anga-angi bhava of sorts. So fire, so these sparks emanate out of, like, they come out of the fire. So fire is Brahman, and sparks are the Jiva. So they are all potentially divine. Now another thing that happens is that Brahman is defined as Sat Chidananda. Okay? So what is Sat? Huh? The truth? That is Satya. Yeah, so Sat is existence. Okay? Sat is like that which exists. Chit is consciousness. So anything that is conscious. And then Ananda? Yeah. And also Buddha's disciple. So bliss, not just joy, bliss. So what is Brahman? Brahman is existence. consciousness and bliss. Now what happens in, so if he made, everybody was like Satchidananda, then like there was no play, like maybe again he'll get bored. So what he does is that he conceals something, okay, so he conceals Ananda from the jivas. So you are always looking for bliss, like you are always looking for happiness, right? But happiness is not equal to bliss, because bliss is sort of endless happiness of sorts. So, but you exist, right? And then there is chit, so you are conscious also. But what about these jada? So if you are to say that he creates the world through himself, then what about these jada padarthas? So then Vallabhacharya would argue that he conceals both chit and anand. So this exists, the table exists, but it cannot feel me. It is not conscious. It can't do anything. So so there is a concealment of chit and anand in this, and there is a concealment of ananda in us. But they are all potentially Satchidananda. So it's from himself he's making this world, Krishna. And in fact, there's a beautiful verse, Namo Bhagavate Tasmin Krishnaya Adbhuta Karmane Nama Rupa Vibhedena Jagat Kridati Goyana. So this is at the beginning of the Tattva-Deepa Nibandha, where Vallabha is praising. Oh my God, I haven't even gotten into it, so I will get into it. So where Vallabha praises Krishna as somebody who takes all these names and forms from himself, produces this world, and yet is not attached to this world. And yeah, so is this clear? Now, in this process of formation of the jiva, there are these Pancha Mahaparvas of avidya. So there are these false adhyasas. So there are these superimposition. What do you identify yourself with? This, say, body, right? So there is a dehadhyasa. Then your manas, your mind. So then there is an adhyasa of mind. Then there is an antahakaran, right? There is this internal organ. So you identify. So when you ask the question, who am I? What is it that comes to your head? It could be this body, it could be this mind perhaps that is thinking or whatever. And then finally there is sort of prapancha vismriti. No, there's not prapancha vismriti. There is sort of vismriti of your true nature. So you forget who you really are. And you really are servant of Krishna, Vallabha would argue, because you are his part. So you forget. Being exposed by Maya to this Vidya, etc., you just forget who you really are, and therefore you are caught in this endless cycle of rebirth. Is that clear? Good. So then, what shall be your aim? To recognize your sort of true form, and that is also not up to you. It's the grace of the Lord. So that is where pushti comes in. So say the Lord decides, okay, I now want to provide bliss or reveal bliss in somebody. So he would cause this pushti leela, and as a result of that, that particular individuated soul would become free, and would at least not free, would enjoy, would relish and experience the ananda. So he defines. So we see Bhakti. Somebody defined it as worship, right? We talked about Ramanuja also. Now, Vallabhacharya defines Bhakti in this manner, and this is actually an older definition. So, Mahatma Jnana Purvastu Sudriha Sarvatodhika Sneho Bhakti Riti Proktaha Traya Muktirna Chanyatha. Okay? So Mahatma, so first you should know the greatness, the glory of the Lord. And then you have to have very determined and extreme love, Sneho Bhakti Riti Proktaha. So this kind of love, sneha, and sneha is another. So oil is also called sneha, and it sticks onto your body. So similarly, bhakti is like something that sticks onto you in some manner. Na muktir taya muktir chananyatha. Okay, so that is the only way of mukti. So otherwise, you can't attain mukti through jnana or through karma, but bhakti is the way. Then at other place he says bhakti shabdasya pratyartha prema dhatvartha seva. Okay, so the word bhakti really, so at its verbal root is this word bhaja sevayam from Panini's dhatu part, and it means seva, and seva could mean both service and relishment. Like we say jal sevan karge, right? We say that something seva, phal seva, whatever. So if you eat, you are relishing fruit, that is also seva. And if you offer it to somebody, that is another kind of seva, like Rogiyon ki seva and whatnot. So Vallabha basically traces this root of bhakti to Panini's dhatu part and argues that bhakti means seva. Now, Vithalnathji, his son, we can just go to the translation now because there aren't really many Sanskritists here. I mean, there are Sanskritists but not Sanskrit students. So he says in this text called the Bhakti Hamsa, may he who is untouched by the injunctions of mantras, meditation, Vedic and Tantric worship, etc., and delights in his devotees be everything for me. So in Bhakti Hamsa, basically he argues that Krishna or Brahman cannot be attained by any of these means that you know. So like, you know, if you were to be worshipping Krishna or you were to be meditating on Krishna, that is not going to help because it is something that is beyond all that. And he uses a Shruti from Kathopanishad, and it also comes up in Mundakopanishad, which is Na ayam atma pravachanena labhyo na bahuna shrutena, and then it ends with saying Yameva vrinute tenaiva labhya. So whom he chooses, himself, he attains. Like, so if the self, the Brahman chooses you, only then can you be free. But if you would say perform a lot of karma, if you perform, like if you listen to the Vedas quite a lot and all that, it's not going to help, it's not going to work. So he uses this Shruti statement to make this argument that Krishna himself decides, and like therefore bhakti is not something that you can just practice SME, but it is you are chosen to be on the path of bhakti. So see, this is very different from the kind of bhakti movement narrative that you hear. It's quite exclusivist, right? It's not like anybody can just come in. But however, I must say that it is also exclusivist to Brahmins because it's saying that listening to a lot of Vedas is not going to help. Listening or performing a lot of karma is not going to help. With some earlier Bhakti Vedantins had argued that say karma would lead to Bhakti or Jnana would lead to Bhakti. That's not the kind of argument he's making. He's saying that the Lord decides who gets to be a Bhakta. So now let's come to Seva and Varṇāśramadharma. So I'll come to some ethnography bit. So we began I think 5 minutes later than we were supposed to say, like go until 5 minutes past 3. So this Ramesh bhai I interviewed while I was doing my fieldwork. So due to COVID I could not come back to India. I had a very different project, but then I had to move to this because during my PhD because I couldn't have come to India during COVID and done my fieldwork here. So I interviewed somebody in New Jersey, Hoboken, New Jersey, and Ramesh bhai is a Pushti Madhya, and he performs his daily seva, and the seva includes like waking the deity up, the image of the deity up, dressing him, feeding him in a particular, singing to him. So he's like really treated as a family member, so to say. Now during COVID, his father here in India passed away. So the question before him was to follow these Sutaka observations or not. Okay, so if somebody, so Dharma Shastras would tell you, and the Sutras would also tell you that when somebody dies in the family, there is a course of ritual impurity, and it is sort of a Varṇāśramadharma. It applies differently to people in different Varnas and Ashramas. So to Brahmins, I think it applies for certain days, to Kshatriyas and Dharma, like these Vritikaras would give different duration for that. So Ramesh bhai's question was whether it would apply to seva or not. So whether he's pure enough to perform seva or not. Now, is seva a ritual practice? Perhaps not, because it is not enjoined by the Vedas or Tantra. So it is beyond. So Vithalnath is arguing that what we do as bhakti has not been enjoined anywhere. So it's not like out of an injunction that you are doing it, but it is something you are doing beyond, like because you have been chosen to do this. Now Varṇāśramadharma applies only so long as you are like it's part of injunction. So say if you were to perform a yaga, but if you do something wrong in your Varṇāśramadharma observance, then the yaga is going to fail because everything is dependent. So it's like really performing an experiment, and if one thing goes wrong, then the entire experiment fails. So similarly, the karma path works like that, and Varṇāśramadharma and this kind of observation applies to that. So his question was there, and he had almost decided to abandon his, not abandon, like discontinue his seva. So in India, what they would usually do is that they would either send the deities to somebody, or somebody else would come and perform the seva for them, because the seva should not stop. And he called Maitri ji, we will come to her. And then she asked him whether he would stop eating and drinking for these days, because there was nobody in the US he could have sent his deities to. So therefore, like, it was a very context sensitive, to use A.K. Ramanujan's words, a context sensitive situation which needed a context sensitive answer. But before we see what he really did, let's get into Vallabha and his grandsons and see what he did. So yeah, the question was whether to serve or not to serve the deity. And you can see the Pushti Marga shrine. It looks like a home. It's a little shrine in Atlanta. Somebody had out there. So yeah, I think I've done this. Now let's see what Vallabha Charya says. So in Tattvātmika Nibandha, he says, one should perform one's dharma, which originated from Shruti and other scriptures, like Smriti, as enjoined for them in accordance with their Varna and Ashrama. So he is defining dharma as Varṇāśramadharma, that is based on Shruti and Smriti. So then, in the same essay, at another place, he writes that, so he defines seva as dharma. Let's see. So that service is itself a purushartha. So how many purusharthas are there otherwise? 4, right? Dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So this dharma is also like, your injunction wala dharma. So what Veda is asking you to do, that sort of dharma being taught in the original scheme of the purusharthas, which also, all the way talks about like how, this crystallized later. But bhakti is supposed to be the panchama purushartha. It is something beyond moksha. It is not something that is just limited to moksha. And he is saying that service, seva itself is this bhakti is called Swatantra, independent. In that state, since conduct as per one's ashrama causes hindrance in the experience of the bliss of the seva, one should abandon the conduct just as one who has attained the state of Brahman does. That is, abandons the conduct of one's ashrama. So again, this is an argument that we find sometimes in Shankaracharya also, that these dharmas only apply to you. So sannyas, yeah, you have a question? Yes.
You said that bhakti is the pancham purushartha, and its result is ananda, which is bliss, different from moksha. So how is moksha and ananda differentiated?
Good question. Yeah. So I think the answer is in 2 levels. So bhakti, they would actually argue that bhakti itself is a result which reveals ananda. So so it's not just, so there is sadhana bhakti and then there is bhakti as phala itself. So maybe at one stage you could be performing some bhakti seva just mechanically, because you are like, you have been put that way on the path, but then you start relishing it. And that, so there is a word used here is sanubhava. So sanubhava is like God is making, like the deity and you are experiencing the same. So anubhava is a Natya Shastra term or sorts, right? So you are making somebody experience what you want them to. So there is this sense of relishment that is shared by the deity and you. So that is the state of bhakti in which ananda is being experienced. Now the other thing is that if you were, say, somebody that, and then there are kinds and kinds of mukti. So there is sayujya, sarupya, salokya, samipya. So you could be near, like closer to God. You could be in front of Him, and there is sayujya. So you could just become part of God. So when you become part of God, then you cannot experience it, right? Because there is no distinction between you and Him. So in that state, the relishment really does not happen. So these bhaktas would say that we do not want that sort of sayujya. We do not want a state in which we cannot relish the Lord. So that is the kind of ananda that is being talked about. But they do say that, but it is being compared to sort of Brahmananda, which is also a state. But this is greater than that. We can have a conversation after my talk about this. I can explain it in detail. then what he says is that people in that state, like who have realized the Brahman, also just abandon their karmas. So you would say, if you notice, sannyasins, they do not wear sacred thread. And that is because they, like one of the whole rituals that they perform, so there are 4 ashramas, remember? So Brahmacharya, Grihastha, and Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. How did Dhritarashtra die? Like, there was so there was a forest fire and he dies, right? So people say that he died of his own. Have you in films or like in real life, have you seen like how they take fire from home when they perform whatever Antyeshti? So it's an ishti. So during the cremation ritual, they take fire from home. So that is one's own fire that one was supposed to keep. Nobody keeps it. I mean, there are people who keep it. But so that's their own fire through which the Antya ishti is performed. The last ishti rite is performed through that. Now sannyasins do not perform that. So sannyasins in the home called the Girja home give up their sacred thread. So then they cannot. So they are out of these ritual duties. Now that's the kind of argument being made here. So people performing seva when they can also conduct or they can also abandon conduct of their ashrama. Then the Bhagavata Purana, so which is what we are going to look at today. So there is this conversation between Kapila, who is considered to sage Kapila, who is considered to be an avatar of Vishnu, and is a Sankhya scholar in the narrative. There are texts attributed to him, and he is having this conversation with his mother Devabhuti, and he is giving a discourse on Bhakti. And one of the things he says is that one should practice one's Svadharmas to the best of one's ability and avoid Vidharmas. One should be content with what one gains by the grace of God and worship the feet of someone who knows the self. So this is one of the things one should do if one wants to tread the path of Bhakti. Now, we can avoid Sanskrit and just read the translation. So by one's dharmas, the dharma, so this is Vallabhacharya's commentary, Subodhini, on this verse. Okay, it's a very long commentary. So by one's dharma, the dharmas of the body are implied. So remember like how self associates itself with the body and then mind. So there are these wrong superimpositions that happens when the jiva comes into existence, or like when jiva gets caught in the cycle of rebirth. So by one's dharmas, the dharmas of the body are implied. These dharmas of the body have been validated as per the eligibility of one's Varṇāśrama and should be practiced as per one's ability. They should not be curtailed if one is capable of performing them. Cessation of Vidharma is the second means. So, you should perform your Varṇāśramadharma, whatever it asks you to, and again it is context sensitive. And cessation of Vidharma is the second means. Vidharma is that which hinders dharma. That is, by performing Vidharma, one's dharma is hindered. Vidharma should be ascertained as per one's eligibility. Until this body remains, Varṇāśramadharmas are one's dharmas. In that state, even Bhagavad Dharma is Vidharma or Paradharma. So long as you associate, identify yourself with your body, that I am this body with 5 fingers and 8 fingers and 2 thumbs, then this is your dharma is your Varṇāśramadharma because it belongs to Varṇāśrama. Then and seva is Paradharma. When one considers oneself to be an individual soul, jiva, distinct from one's body, then servitude, dasyam, is Svadharma. Other dharmas like Varṇāśramadharma become Paradharma. So in a state when you realize your true nature as the servant of Krishna, then Varṇāśramadharma becomes Paradharma. So it's not like really abandonment of Varṇāśramadharma, but it's a very careful articulation of when that possibility really arises. So it's not saying all this just like leave all your Varṇāśramadharma, but it's saying that okay, when you reach that state perhaps and we can discuss like when that happens, he's arguing that you could leave this. Now again like something important for historians. So this is the time when in Banaras there are these pandits sitting at the Vishwanath temple in the Mukti Mandapa, and Rosalind O'Hanlon and Christopher Minkowski have like written a lot on those folks. So they were like coming up with these jati nirnay as to take who can take dana. So they're also questioning the status of Brahmins. So not all communities of Brahmins are entitled to take dana. or who are Kayasthas, or who are these Vaishyas, who are Rajputs. So these are the kinds of Nirnay Patras that they are supplying, sitting in Kashi. And there is this one guy called Gopinath who really ridicules the Vaishnavas. So he's in the 15th century and he's like, okay, these Vaishnavas, they are born of, like, they have nature lineages, they do not follow Varṇāśramadharma, they are deluded, and they are so, they get, like, they are Ved Virodhi, they are Ved Vidushakas, the same kinds of slangs that you hear for Jainas and Buddhists in early India, you are hearing those for these kinds of Vaishnavas. Now, some of these Vaishnava then scholars are treading the path very carefully. So like somebody like, well, I'm not saying that he doesn't really feel for that, but one way of reading a statement like this could be that there is a push from these very, very orthodox Brahmins, and somebody is trying to be careful. So they do not want to sort of come out as all radical and whatever, but they feel that bhakti is not what some of these other people are professing, but there is possibility in bhakti where you carry on with your Varṇāśramadharma and also can abandon it at a certain stage. Now let's really quickly look at Vallabha's grandsons and what they say on Seva and Varṇāśramadharma. So Vallabhacharya's grandson. So this is the text. I don't have it in Sanskrit. So this is in Bhakti Vardhini, and in Bhakti Vardhini's first verse it says the method of making the seed firm, the Bijadadhyam Prakaram, is that having stayed at home, the one who has not turned away from one's dharma, Svadharmataha, okay, remember this term, Svadharmataha, should serve Krishna through puja and shravana, etc. So Balakrishna, a commentator, he says, the method of making the seed firm is that, so this is the verse, he says, by the phrase Svadharmataha, in the verse, it is implied that one should serve Krishna, who is only attainable through bhakti, while practicing one's own dharma, that is Varṇāśramadharma. So it's very clear that he means Varṇāśramadharma, he's not like his grandfather making two claims, okay? Then there is Gokulanji, okay? I missed Raghunathji because he makes a similar argument. He makes the same argument that by Varṇāśramadharma, by Svadharma, they mean Varṇāśramadharma. Now he says here by the word Svadharma, the Varṇāśramadharma is not intended. So he's from the same generation, they are brothers, and Gokulanji is saying that no. I mean, Svadharma here cannot mean Varṇāśramadharma, but the dharma of one's path, the dharma of Krishna. Now the question is how? Because Varṇāśramadharmas are not Svadharma, it is as such. Dharma is of two kinds. First, culminating in the body, Sharira Paryavasayan, and the second is culminating in the self. Of the two, everything from the twilight worship, so Sandhya Vandan to sacrifice, and the Varṇāśramadharmas culminate in body. So you are not performing anything for the jiva, you are performing it for the body. Because they amount to enjoyment, including that of the world of Indra. So because these yagas etc. will not get you Brahman or bliss or anything, but they will only keep you in the heaven for some time, then you will enjoy chill in the heaven, and then you come back, once your punyas are exhausted. So the word swa means self, and therefore the word swadharma, a dharma that culminates in the self, is atma paryavasayan. So it cannot be the body paryavasayan, sharira paryavasayan dharma is implied. The dharma that is, and that dharma is the Bhagavad dharma. Okay, so he is very clear that it cannot be Varṇāśramadharma. Further, and this was for Sanskrit as I had put it, but let's read it. So further in the phrase Svadharmataha, so if you read that, due to the addition of the suffix tasil. So there are all these suffixes in Sanskrit that just transform the word. I mean, it's all dhatu and pratyaya that Sanskrit is scared about, or grammarians care about other. So due to the addition of this suffix tasil to the word dharma, it has become an indeclinable, avyaya. Okay? And the meaning of the word dharma becomes unaltered. It becomes avikrita. That unaltered meaning of the word dharma is Bhagavad dharma. Okay? Because vikar, so association with body is sort of vikara. But if you really think of swa as jiva, then it is Bhagavad dharma is what he is implying. So by the word swadharma, Bhagavad dharma is implied, and this claim is irrefutable by all means. So he's actually, his brothers are saying that it's Varṇāśramadharma, and this chap is like, no, that argument doesn't work. If one were to ask what is Svadharma, it is said in the response, Krishna Seva. Okay? So if you were to ask, like, what is the dharma? So if we go back, that karma is dharma, and if we think of ekam shastram devaki putra gitam, it's like, it all ties back to that one karika, which tells us that the real duty, the real dharma is Krishna Seva. So yeah, now coming back to Ramesh Bhai, okay, after all this. So this is Maitri ji, she is a 17th generation descendant of Vallabhacharya. She lives in Halod. An excellent scholar, she helped me through my PhD with texts and interpretations. Ramesh Bhai sort of, approaches her and asks what he should do, and she says that, if you could abandon your seva, like if you are not going to eat, drink, or perform your daily chores, then you could do this for the deity also. But in this state, so the dictum that governs seva is yatha dehe tatha dehe. So as you do for your body, so like if you're feeling cold, you will see that people dress their deities also with heavy clothing, and so the shringar changes. So basically, your body becomes the just as you live here, you want your deity also to be kept in the similar manner. And we can talk about like how adhyasa doesn't work in this way. So she asked him that, and then Ramesh Bhai continued to perform. Like even in Sutak, he performed seva, although then he performed some cleansing rituals and all. But this was an interesting case. Like this wouldn't have happened in India. And then she also quoted from the Vartas, which Vasudha Dalmi and others have written about. So there are a few. So these Vartas are hagiographical account of Vallabhacharya's devotees, disciples. And in some of them we see that there is a menstruating woman who performs seva, which is again like a complete no, if it was a service. But these are exceptions because they are identified as people like who have reached what is called the vyasana avastha. Like they are sort of addicted to God, so they cannot live without Him, and they cannot just be without serving Him. So in that sort of state, anything is permitted, and Varṇāśramadharma sort of sheds on its own. So it's not something that you cling on to. So this is, I mean, to conclude, I would say that that the discussion on Varṇāśramadharma, seva, bhakti, etc. is more complex than we usually see, because if we just focus on vernacular songs, etc., there's one idea of bhakti that comes out, especially from this period. But if we go back, and I mean, I haven't even scratched the surface here in this tradition. There's several more traditions, and these are multilingual traditions. So they're writing in Braj. In Braj, I mean, their tone is different, genres are different. They are maybe teaching similar things, or sometimes different things also, in very varied manners. So I think there more needs to be done from there. With these texts and tradition, and we need to read very, very carefully to really understand what these scholars meant when they said things like abandon your Varṇāśramadharma or don't do it. So on that note, I will end. Thank you.
If anybody has any questions, please take it.
At the end, when you mentioned that, when people are addicted to seva, is that similar to how the gopis are sometimes portrayed as addicted to Krishna?
Absolutely, yeah. So these narratives are also like in the Bhagavata, and they are sort of exemplars. They're not to be copied. So in some traditions, gopis are to be copied. And you could read Haberman for that, acting as a way of salvation. He wrote his dissertation on that. But in Pushti Marga, it's not the case. So those are sort of the best of the bhaktas. You can draw inspiration from them, but you can never be like them because then they are special. But yes, it's that kind of state. And you hear this like Krishna Nama Japte, Shavana Sinori Ali, Bhuli Bhavana Hoto, Bhavali. So I've gone mad, after hearing the name of Krishna. And the song ends by saying, like, by just hearing name of this person, I've gone mad. I don't know what will happen when I see him. Mukhahuna aave bena chittahuna padat chain. So like I cannot keep my mind still. Words do not come out of my mouth. So you find those sorts of states in describing the songs.
I'll begin by confessing I didn't understand a lot because
Okay.
I'm illiterate when it comes to like Sanskrit and also not a good history student. I study philosophy. So this is based mostly on like a lot the part of stuff like I was able to understand by reading the abstract. So I think that there is at some level a move happening in like like an ontological self-realization, like the idea that okay, if you take like oneself and to be like one's body, then there's like only like duties at like the level of the body and the social and so on. But if you have like self-realization of oneself as the word is jiva, an individual soul, then there's like your duty becomes a devotional service here to Krishna.
Right.
So like there's like a rejection of like the materiality of the body as like but like there's transcendence from that at the metaphysical level that's happening. I just want to like in terms of power, if you see it, then like it's a question between okay, there's like still the social and historical nature of body's materiality, because to be even able to say that okay, my body is not really me, there's something transcendent from me that's really me. It depends on whether your body is like socially protected, as it would be if you're say a Brahmin, and it's not socially protected. It's exploited as labor in all forms when you're a Shudra or a Dalit. So like there is in this like metaphysic a basic there's like uneven access to transcendence based on Varna or like caste. I prefer to call it that. That social issues tackle.
Very good question. Sorry, I can address it. So if you look at the 84 Vaishnavan ki Varta and the 252 Vaishnavan ki Varta, which are these hagiographical texts, and you do a caste survey there, you find that the most disciples of Vallabhas, I think, in case of Vallabhacharya, who has like 84 disciples, maybe 50% are Brahmins, but most are non-Brahmins. And in Vittalnath's cases, in the 252 Vaishnavan ki Varta, most of them are non-Brahmins or non-upper caste people. So, and even if you look at this today, a lot of people from the Patel community, which is not an upper caste, but certainly, it's a powerful community, but it's not an upper caste community, so to say. In Gujarat, they are Kushti Martyrs. There would be the mercantile communities. In fact, there is some way work engaging with this in where they are othering Divya Kurian's work. I think it's called Merchants of Virtue. She deals with some of this, but if you really do, this kind of survey, in fact, I would say that this is giving you the possibility of transcending the caste and gender-based, because this person who is a disciple of Vallabha, he gets her into her fold, his fold, and she's a Vaishya, and she performs seva during not Sutaka, but during her menstrual periods. So you find a lot of these stories, which I certainly did not look at in this talk. But I would say that there's a lot of possibility. And to give you one the best of the examples is that one of the foremost disciples of Krishna Das, who was an Adhikari of the temple at Srinathji. So a non-Brahmin, in fact a Shudra, he's in the Varta identified as a Shudra, but yeah, definitely he's not out of the fold of the Chaturvedi Vyavastha. He gets to keep Vithalnathji out of the temple in service of Srinathji for a very long period. And then they go to the Mughal court, and there is and the king, the Badshah, passes the judgment. Then he's so this Brahmin is not allowed, whose father really founded the temple, is not allowed in the temple by a Shudra. So I think this is also creating possibility of getting access to those spaces. Bhakti, as we heard about it in the Bhakti movement narrative. But what my argument is that one needs to look at it very carefully, like how these arguments are being made. Is it like just refusal of all of it, or there is some fine line between it? Have I answered your question?
So we also observe that Bhakti comes up in Narayana, in the Shanti Parva in Mahabharata. And there's a key importance on the starter of meditation, that when the three brothers, they through meditation go to Shveta, they are not able to see Vishnu in his divine form. But all the bhaktas are there and they are not even acknowledged by the bhaktas. But when Narada performs his meditation, he can see the bhaktas and the Vishnu and he is acknowledged. So in Bhakti itself that we see from Vallabhacharya, is there a prominence of, fixated upon meditation, or the Nam Jap is transmigrated to meditation?
Yeah, so in good question again, thank you. So in initiation, so I mean this is an initiatory path, and the first initiation is the Nam Diksha. So you get an Ashtakshara mantra from the Guru, and then you do Nam Japa. And then when the Guru deems it fit, like you are fit to perform seva, then you again address the caste related question. Brahmasam is not reserved for Brahmins only. It is open to all. It is also open to women. And this possibility is being created by this kind of careful argumentation that is happening. So this is a very nice argument to make, that the object of bhakti is beyond all these ritual actions that the Vedas and Tantras are teaching. So therefore the rules that otherwise apply to Vedic and Tantric bhakti or like paths do not apply to my kind of bhakti, because mine is beyond that. And this is also in response to other ideas. So if you look at Ramanuja and Madhva, Ramanuja in fact says that yaga and dhyana are going to be means to attain bhakti, and this bhakti is this constant stream of blah blah blah, right? I get that. So there is a difference between how bhakti is also being defined and an understanding of it, and whether karma and or not, or it's a swatantra path. Is it something on? Because if you look at the Gita also has at least Yamunacharya, who's before Ramanujacharya, and some people would say his guru. He came up with this division of Gita into the triad of karma, bhakti, and jnana. So you would usually see that the 3 chapters are about karma, then 3 chapters about jnana, and then 3 chapters about bhakti. So that happens. Yeah. So but Vallabha wouldn't argue that. He'd say like bhakti is something different. Yes.
I recently came across these terms of like Aveda and then Veda and then Veda. What is the implication of these terms, and is Vallabha arguing for one, and what are these?
Okay. So I'm forgetting this. So if you look at, if you want to know, Andrew Nicholson has written about this in Unifying Hinduism. There's this book, and he traces the history of doxographies in India, and there he deals with the question of Bheda Ved. So if you look at the Brahma Sutras, the position that the Brahma Sutras are taking, Nicholson argues, is really the Bheda Ved position. That there is a level of distinction and non-distinction between the Supreme Self and the individuated or individual self. Shankara's reading, he would say, is actually sort of this, like he's influenced by the Buddhists in some ways. Except, there is Anatman here and there is Atman here. So, and that, if you want to read that on that, you should read Tagore. Where was I? Okay, I forgot. Yeah. So, Bheda. So there is this scholar, there is somebody called Bhartri Prapancha, there is also Varṇāśramadharma, who are taking the Bheda sort of position. Now, people like Ramanuja, Madhva would not fit here, but Vallabhacharya, they are only saying that we are Vedavadins. But if you read them carefully, you do see even in the they do identify as Vedavadins. So we do see that, and it seems like the natural position in the Brahma Sutras, because at one place the Brahma Sutra is saying that the Brahman and Jiva are are non-different, and there is Niravayava, and at one place it says that the Jiva of Brahman. And Ramanuja, when he reads, when Shankara reads this Amsha business, he says that, oh no, this is only a figurative expression. So this is not what the sutra really means, because it has already established that that the Brahman is Niravaya, it cannot have parts. So, have I answered this?
I will identify Palak.
Can I quickly ask a few questions? So, thanks Aditya for that. You may answer them here, we could park them and talk about it later. But just three things. The one from history, two from history, one from religion theology. So, you have now begun to do this kind of work, and I'm sure there are others also who are doing this. But what happens to the canon in the sense that those bhaktas and those bhakta traditions, bhakti traditions, that are very much at the center of the social history projects that are dominated, writing about bhakti and history. So, for example, rather than just do a social history of Kabir, do a philosophical history. And to show changes also across time among his anuyanis and sampradayas as they develop over time. So, is there now a fear that, is there now a possibility that two kinds of historiographical orientations will develop? One, when you will look at this less visible, slightly marginal, I would say, usual textbook history of Bhakti, where this kind of study might be done. But the main ones, the Semida, the very visible ones, obvious ones, we might still keep them largely in social history and not push them towards this kind of thing also. So that's just a thought.
I think actually you go ahead.
The other is late 19th hours and early 20th century with colonial revenue policy and agreements and all that, as the Advani system is breaking up and subaltern communities are experiencing various kinds of economic, social, political sort of pulls and pressures. The subaltern caste entrance into the Ramanandi Sampradaya begin after a while to start making their own matras, where some sort of kind of seems still to be largely informed by Brahmanical or somewhat related sort of frameworks, can be either partly or entirely abandoned. And so you see a fissure there among the Ramanandis, where there are lower caste Ramanandis with their own dharmas and their own ideas of seva, and the older ones continue. I was just thinking whether there might be something happening there. And finally, so this, if you look at Luther's theology and the question of faith alone, salvation by sola fide, salvation by faith alone, and the idea of grace, that only, of course, this becomes a big question about free will and predestination. So, of course, this would be interesting to put these discussions alongside each other, not just for Pushkin idea, but also in general. Just thoughts.
Yeah, so shall I answer?
Yeah, perhaps we could later.
Sure, yes. But I want to take the last question.
Sure.
So, sorry. But, so I have been trying to read a theologian, Nicholas Cusa, who is also supposed to be, certainly at the, he's one who like really ushers in modernity and he's an older contemporary of Vallabha. And Vallabha, in his sort of definition of the Brahman, defines or like identifies it as Vidharma. So it is the abode of opposing qualities. And Kusa very interestingly says something similar. I think it's coincidential opposite forum in Latin. So that the opposites coincide in the God. And he came up with this idea of learned ignorance. Ignorancia, the doctrina ignorancia or something, yeah. So the thesis of learning ignorance, that you learn to know your limits, because the God is define God, and therefore you rely on blah blah blah. So there is a sort of the element there also in that text. So I think some of us are doing that as well, and Francis Clooney comes to my head when I sit down with this.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the History Society, the Philosophical Society, Sanskrit Sahitya Sabha, and Internet Quality Assurance Cell, I extend a heartfelt thanks to Professor Aditya Chaturvedi for taking the time out to give this insightful lecture. We would like to present you with a token of appreciation. I request Dr. Aditya to kindly present the memento to sir. I would also like to express my gratitude towards Dr. Sabina Kalki, Professor Pankaj Kumar Mishra, Dr. Silika Mohapatra, Dr. Aditya and Dr. Nanadaya. This event would not be possible without your support. Finally, a huge thanks to all of you for being such a good audience and making this event a success. We hope you had a nice time. Thank you.
We also have some tea and questions outside, so we will have you.
Everybody, please, can you please
Yes.